Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Buyer's Guide podcast, where we talk all things property and finance. My name is Peter Mastriani, the founder of the Buyer's Guide, and in today's cast, I would like to discuss something that is pretty topical, and that is owning a home a privilege or a right? Now, I talk property all day with my clients. I read a lot of content about everyday Australians that are priced out of the market and hear a lot of conversation about how things were so much tougher 20 or 30 years ago and the vice versa on that. So, look, I thought I would investigate this for myself. And having my own podcast, this affords me the luxury of sharing my opinions en masse. So, look, I guess without further ado, here's my take on the realities of yesteryear and today. So, let's get to it. Housing affordability is an incredibly complex area. And look, times have changed, no doubt about it. Yes, interest rates in the late 80s and the 90s were in the high teens, and yes, today's property prices are through the roof. Trying to compare the numbers and break down any sort of analysis around this, I feel would probably be a little bit undercooked. Firstly, because I'm not the greatest mathematician, and second of all, you would need to assume some sort of consistency in the numbers over an extended period of time, which, in fairness, look, wouldn't be an accurate depiction of what happens in the market, which actually operates in an imperfect manner. For example, we would need to assume that there would be some sort of consistency around interest rates and for wages to keep rising at their historical pace. And as we know, neither of those factors will actually happen. Incorporating disposable income will probably be difficult because tax rates are different. Plus, we would need to account for superannuation, which was very much in its embryonic stage, if not even existent at that point in time. Also, we couldn't really factor in that lenders have created and adapted hundreds of new lending products that allow you to borrow 95% of the value of the property, or products that allow you to borrow through your superannuation fund, or any other number of sexy ways that you can use to leverage. What it boils down to, though, the truth of it all is that housing is expensive. There's no doubt about it. But in reality, everything in Australia seems bloody expensive. It's a valid argument to make, and the older generation will often rebut with, well, at the time we paid 17% interest rates. You guys have got it so lucky. You're only paying 4%. And look, it's a very valid argument. It's a really good argument, and no doubt it was difficult. My parents went through this period, and it was bloody tough for them. And it was tough for every family that gave away 50% of their wage towards interest payments alone. On that point alone, no matter the era, when that happens, it would be mighty tough trying to balance the household accounting budget. However, living through this experience and surviving at the end, no doubt you would want to share your tales and let others know that you did it tough too. So I personally accept this as an argument and by no means want to water down the tribulations that others have gone through. However, the but was always coming. However, the environment of sky-high interest rates, they didn't last forever because the Australian economy went into recession, and to recover and re-stimulate the economy, interest rates tumbled. And then a new series of events took place. But anyway, back to the point. For now, unfortunately, housing isn't going to get any cheaper. The market has adapted and people actively pursue property as an investment vehicle to build wealth. Foreign investors compete in the market. Self-managed superannuation funds are also out there. Lenders have adapted their products to tailor for any number of different borrowing niches to help cater for non-traditional borrowing. These factors create demand for existing property, which we all know, in turn, increases the value. Also, the cost of construction is getting more expensive. We are a high cost, low production workforce, and the cost of materials is getting increasingly more expensive. Ask anyone that's trying to build or do a renovation project at this point in time, let alone trying to get an accurate quote out of a tradesperson. Also, governments are slow to actually release new land for building developments. And even though more recently there's been some pretty significant construction activity, lenders are now starting to tighten their belts for this type of appetite of lend. So, while some may feel that there is a glut in the market, and look, in some markets there definitely is a glut, but the market is eventually going to absorb it, and soon enough demand will outweigh supply, and will go around and around and around and around like the vortex that we operate in. The truth is that the market has actually created this, and government policy, rightly or wrongly, hasn't exactly helped. Be that through stamp duty and land taxes, or the first home buyers grant, or creating concessions through superannuation. And also, more recently, it's copped a little bit of slack, or a lot of slack. Negative gearing has also contributed towards this. So, whilst I mention negative gearing, let's chat about that in a little bit more detail. As I said, and as we all know, housing is expensive in Australia. There's no arguing about that. And the government, conveniently, they know that housing is pretty expensive too. They've known this for a long time. And as Australia's population continues to increase, they had the foresight to try and do something about this early, because they didn't exactly have the fiscal capability to pay for housing out of their own pocket. Um, so, what they did was provide a subsidy to encourage people like you, like myself, like the mums and dads out there, and even the extremely wealthy people that are looking for tax breaks, to essentially chip in and increase the available rental pool for the population. Now, why did they do this? Because by providing a subsidy, albeit that subsidy is in the billions of dollars, and provided as a tax break, it remains a lot better value for money than removing it and wearing the burden and the strain on what will continue to be a stretched public housing system. So alleviating some of this pressure helps to also stimulate the economy. It creates jobs. It encourages investment, which in turn creates a better standard of living, which in turn also means higher house prices. Now, did I mention before that this was an overly complex issue? Encouraging investment from a government perspective means in your working years you can have the ability to build, an asset base as large as you can to be self-funded in retirement. Another reason why there are concessions through superannuation, which are particularly generous, because the government does not want us to be reliant on them via a tax-funded pension. It's as simple as that. These aspects alone give rise to the investor, and the investor has really made leaps and strides over the last 20 years. It's definitely increased the amount of competition on traditionally more affordable areas, where numerous buyers are trying to compete with one another. That price range of 400 to 600,000 is probably the sweet spot across the nation, where first home buyers and investors are trying to compete for established housing, because on that basis it's really hard for a first home buyer to get a break, because there legitimately is so much competition out there. So those factors are their own aspect alone. However, I would like to go on and highlight some other areas of why affordability is continuing to get pushed outwards. So, firstly, times have changed. It's now socially acceptable to be living on your own, and doing so when you're in your 20s or in your teens, and look, not getting married until you're in your 30s or your 40s or your 50s, or who cares when you get married. there are more women in the workforce, and they're returning back to work after they have children. And look, this is a fairly new dynamic that's happened in the last 20 or 30 years, and that dynamic creates its own additional challenges around property because people need more flexibility to, cater for the life that they've actually created. And people are demanding more flexibility as they need to be closer to work, to schools, to public transport, and infrastructure. They want flexibility and smaller dwellings. Hence why there's been an explosion of 1 and 2 bedroom units that have appeared more recently. The way that we interact with property is also extremely different. I remember as a kid when my parents were looking at purchasing a home, the real estate agent would actually take you around in their own car, and you would see half a different dozen different properties in the one day. Excuse me. Now, look, at this point in time, I personally couldn't think of anything worse and would much prefer to hide behind my own computer screen and secretly stalk the property. And with augmented reality, there's no doubt that that's going to improve further. Can you imagine attending an open home and doing so from the comfort of your own home? That is, of course, if you can pull yourself away from your Pokemon app. But that's where technology is taking us. It's there at this point in time. It has the capability. It just needs to be affordably rolled out and for the uptake to take place. Now, the second thing that I wanted to discuss is that the banking system has also changed. Lending has changed significantly. I've been a mortgage broker for a little while, and in that time, I've seen dramatic changes take place. We did discuss interest rates a little earlier. However, what I would like to discuss is that lending products have also adapted. There are lending products now that allow you to borrow, say, 95% of the value of the purchase. That definitely didn't exist 30 years ago. Lender's mortgage insurance didn't exist 30 years ago. So whilst it is tougher to save for a deposit, alternatives do exist. Yes, it can be expensive, but over the life of the loan, the cost is actually a small percentage. So I think a better question to ask is, what is the opportunity cost of not leveraging a higher borrowing capacity and missing out on the potential capital growth and being in your own home over that period of time? Thirdly, and I touched upon technology, however, I believe this to be the third aspect to have really disrupted our potential to access property. Why? Well, because we find ourselves faced with the predicament of information overload. It comes to us from all different areas, all pushing their own individual messages. And we go about doing our own research, and look, it's enough to give us analysis paralysis and prevent us from actually making a decision. So, back to the point. Then or now, what was actually harder? Well, I genuinely feel that is and was hard for both generations. And it's going to probably get even harder for the generations to come. And through no fault of our own, we've created the beast. A property beast, that is. And as society continues to change, I believe it's a fair question to have a legitimate debate on whether or not home ownership is actually a necessity. I say this because, there is a growing trend to bringing simplicity to life, to downsizing, to creating more meaningful work, to giving back to the community, all of which is great to have. So why complicate things further by adding unrealistic pressure and, trying to keep up with the Joneses and overcommitting to a debt that you potentially may not be able to afford? Why not focus on creating a life that you would actually love to have? To, have your cake and to eat it too. That's why I'm a firm believer of trying to grow the largest asset base that you can with the money that you can actually afford. Fractional property investing through crowdfunding and the rise of the rentvestor are the new alternatives, ones that I actively champion and are going to continue to do so. So look, to finish off with my rambling response to the then and now debate, I'll end with this. It was hard in the past. It continues to be hard, and it has the potential to get even harder in the future. So the best bet is to try and do something now, as difficult as that may seem, because as much as we protest, the market will continue to beat its capitalist drum. The Rolling Stones. I love the Rolling Stones. So to sum it up with a bit of a personal favourite song, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you might just find that you actually get what you need. So, look, I know I've touched upon a pretty topical or controversial topic. I would encourage feedback, and I would encourage you to get in contact with me and share your thoughts via the Buyer's Guide, or email me directly at peter@thebuyersguide.com.au. Please share your thoughts, and more than open to having a conversation with you directly, and even getting you to share your thoughts on the podcast directly for episodes to come. So I'll look forward to hearing some feedback from this podcast. But that's it for tonight. Thank you very much, and until next time,